Welcome to reality. You're now on the Code of Mind channel. Sometimes there are days when you suddenly slow down in the middle of all this chaos and catch one simple but very harsh thought. Okay, work, loans, relationships, children, countries, crises. But what is all this even for? Why am I here? If you strip away all the esoteric decoration, religious dogmas, and scientific snobbery, one option remains. We are here to test what our consciousness is capable of. Not the body, not a passport, not social status, but consciousness itself. The thing that is aware that I am I. This reality is not just a place where you have to suffer and survive. It is a huge testing ground, a simulator, a training arena. Call it whatever you want, where you have a dense body, laws of physics, limitations, time, pain, joy. And through all of this, you test. What can I do? Where do I give up? Where do I believe in other people's limits? And where am I ready to check whether it is really impossible? And now we will look at this not in theory, but through examples. Sports, the body, children, death, life after, catastrophes, attention, all in one line. Let's start with what materialists love most. The body. For a long time, there was a rigid belief. A human being is physically incapable of running a mile faster than 4 minutes. Not difficult, not accessible to a few, but impossible. The heart, lungs, muscles would not withstand it. Doctors, coaches, newspapers. Everyone repeated this like a mantra, and most people did not even try to approach this mark. Why try to break through a door when you have been told 100 times that it is sealed with concrete? And then one person appears. Not a comic book superhero, not a movie mutant. An ordinary guy. Talented, determined, but human. Roger Bannister. On May 6, 1954, he steps onto the track and does something that was officially considered abnormal for the human body. He runs a mile in 3 minutes and 59 seconds, and the world goes, oh. So it was possible. No hearts exploded. Gravity did not change. Atmospheric pressure stayed the same. Only one thing changed: the example. Before Bannister, humanity lived with a thought form. The 4-minute mile is a wall. You cannot go there. After Bannister, a new record appeared in the collective field. Someone has already passed through. That means the door is not made of concrete, but of glass. And it began. After some time, other runners also started breaking the 4-minute barrier. At first a few, then dozens, hundreds. Today, thousands. Now 4 minutes is no longer a magical ceiling. It is a mark of high performance, but completely real. Even some school students beat it. What happened? Evolution of the body over 70 years? Not to that extent. New doping and technologies? Yes, there is progress. But the very fact of breaking the barrier happened earlier. The main thing that changed was the internal map of consciousness. If one person could do it, then the human body is capable of it in principle, which means I can come closer too. Not necessarily that I will run it, but it is no longer a forbidden territory of gods. This is a perfect example of how the game works. One person, by his result, rewrites the boundaries of what is normal for everyone. Now let's move from sports to movement in general. Open old black and white dances in your mind. People are beautifully dressed, smiling, moving to music. But their plasticity, their range of motion compared to what we see today, looks, let's say it carefully, stiff. The body looks as if it is constrained by invisible sticks. Step to the side, step back. Standard movements. Very cultured, but very limited. Now remember what dancers do today. Contemporary dance, where the body flows across the floor like water. Breakdance, where people spin on their heads and hands. Hip-hop, crump, popping, twerk, acrobatics. All of this merges, mixes, creating movements that 50 years ago people would have said, is this a human or CGI animation? Our bones, muscles, and joints did not become extraterrestrial. But consciousness stopped believing that normal is only a step right, a step left, and a cautious semicircle. One person allowed themselves to move beyond habitual motion. Then a second. Then thousands saw it. Then children began repeating it at the age of 5 or 7. And within a couple of generations, what was once wow magic became just a new standard of movement. This once again confirms the same idea. The world does not expand by itself. It is expanded by those who do not agree with previous limits. The body is a mirror of consciousness. If inside everything is compressed by fear, shame, and you can't, the body will move, speak, and live the same way. If inside a question appears, what if it can be different? The body eventually begins to reflect that. Now a story that perfectly shows how pure consciousness works without adult limitations. A video once circulated online. A small boy takes a chicken, puts it on a bicycle seat, lifts the bike, and the chicken continues to sit on the seat. From an adult's perspective, this looks like a violation of all rules. A normal adult would say, "You can't do that. It will fall, it won't hold. It's against logic, against physics, against morality altogether." But no one had time to tell the child you can't. He did not have that program in his head. His consciousness simply tested the hypothesis. What if I put it there and ride? And reality agreed. But what interests me more is this. Why wouldn't adults even try? Because their consciousness is ruled not by direct experience, but by a set of pre-installed beliefs. You don't do that. It's not allowed. It won't work. You can't do that with animals. That's stupid. This is the difference between a child and an adult. A child has experience first, conclusions later. An adult has other people's conclusions first, and no experience afterward. We come here in a state where our inner child with a bicycle is ready to test everything. What if this? What if that? But gradually we are taught, don't touch, don't stand out, it's dangerous, you can't, that's not yours. And at some point, a person no longer even approaches the boundary of what is possible. They simply live inside a corridor that was marked out for them. Now let's shift the focus. Let's assume we accept that there is a body. There is consciousness that uses this body. There is experience. What happens when the body dies? On the level of physics, everything is clear. The heart stops, the brain shuts down, biochemical processes of decay begin. The body turns into a set of elements that sooner or later return to the earth, the air, the water. But there was also the one who was aware that they had a body, the one who felt, I love, I am angry, I am afraid, I think, I doubt. Where does that one go? Imagine that your entire life is a movie in a VR headset. You put on the headset and completely forget that you are sitting in a room. You are the character. You run, fight, fall in love, suffer, rejoice. At some point the game is turned off, and you are carefully taken out of the VR. You remove the headset. What do you feel? Wow, I believed in the game so much that I forgot who I really am. Wow, all of that was scenery. And here I am, the one who was playing. The death of the body is the removal of the headset. A conscious soul after leaving the body does not dissolve into nothingness, it expands its perspective. Okay, so that was the game. Those parents, that childhood, that country, that era, those events, where I was broken, where I managed to pass through, where I gave up and where I grew. And then what many traditions call between lives begins. Between the point where the avatar was switched off and the point where a new avatar is entered, there is a space. Not a place on a map, not geography. A state of consciousness. A conscious soul in this state does not run through corridors, does not moan, and does not scare people at night. It looks at the lived scenario like a movie. Here I was weak. Here I was rigid. Here I saved everyone but did not save myself. Here I lived on autopilot. Here I dared to make a choice. And then it asked questions not like, why did all this happen to me? But like, what did this give me? What do I want to explore next? Where do I want to restrict myself? Where do I want to try a different role? Not a victim, but a creator. Not a controller, but one who trusts. Not an eternal child, but an adult. Based on this understanding, a new experience is chosen. Another family, another body, other conditions. Sometimes harsher, sometimes softer, sometimes with a higher level of freedom, sometimes the opposite, not as punishment, but as a последовательный set of experiments. What will happen if, in this life, I try it this way? Now the opposite situation. Imagine a person who lived their entire life as an avatar. They never asked the question, who am I? They fully identified with roles. I am a victim. I am a martyr. I am a boss. I am nobody. They lived by programs of fear, guilt, shame. They were sure that they were a body, a passport, a status, and after death, either a black screen or someone else's scenario of hell or heaven. When such consciousness leaves the body, there is no habit of looking from within. It clings to the scenery, to the last, to the house, to things, to people, to familiar roots. This is what is described as a stuck soul, a ghost, wandering around the house, unable to leave. Not because someone does not let it go, but because there is no skill of letting go of the role. If all your life you believe that you are only a set of bones and experiences, then when the bones are taken away, for you this is not liberation, but shock. Who am I without this? Where are my resentments? Where are my roles? Where is my home? Where are my enemies? And you continue to search for them on the subtle plane, in corridors, in other people's dreams. This is how stories about wandering souls are born, about those who cannot find peace. This is another argument in favor of conscious living. The more you realize yourself here, the easier it will be for you there between lives, because you already know in advance. I am not only an avatar, I am the one who controlled it. I want to tell you a vivid example, a story about a neurosurgeon, a doctor who spent his entire life literally looking at the brain from the inside. His name is Eben Alexander. He worked as a neurosurgeon for more than 20 years, taught, operated, and was a classic materialist. Consciousness is a byproduct of the brain. There are neurons, there is electricity, the brain dies, everything goes out. And then one day his own brain was switched off. He developed a rare aggressive bacterial meningitis. The infection damaged the cerebral cortex so severely that his colleagues seriously discussed whether he would survive at all, and whether it made sense to continue treatment. The chance of survival was considered minimal, and if he did return, it was expected that he would be in a severe condition, without normal cognitive functions. He spent 7 days in a deep coma, and all this time, while the equipment recorded almost zero activity of the cerebral cortex, Eben himself, according to him, was not in emptiness at all. He describes it like this. First, a sensation of falling into a dark, viscous layer of nothingness, something like zero, where there are no thoughts and no images, and then a sharp turn, a sensation of emerging into a space filled with light and presence, the feeling that he was being carried by some intelligent force, contact with beings he perceived as guides, and a feeling of unconditional love that he previously considered a childish fairy tale. He saw his life differently, not as a set of facts, but as a pattern of choices, where he closed himself off, where he was rigid, where he chose fear instead of trust. At some point, according to his own words, he was presented with a choice, to go further into this new state or to return back, into the body, into the hospital, into ordinary reality. And he returned. For doctors, it was almost a medical anomaly. A person whose cerebral cortex, by all data, was practically shut down not only survived, but recovered without severe neurological consequences. But the most important thing did not happen in diagnoses, but in what he did with this story afterward. Eben Alexander, a materialist neurosurgeon after the coma, wrote the book Proof of Heaven, where he podrobno described his experience and how it shattered his previous picture of the world. He could no longer say that consciousness is simply a byproduct of the brain, because his own brain was in a state where, according to medical logic, no vivid, complex, structured inner experiences should have existed. And yet they did. He restructured his life, stopped treating work like a conveyor belt, began talking to people not only as a doctor, but as a person who had seen the boundary. He began openly saying that consciousness can go beyond the body, and that death is not shut down, but transition. At the same time, he remains a doctor, and his story still causes debate. Some say, the brain filled everything in. Others consider him a deceiver. But the fact remains. There is officially documented severe meningitis, coma, almost zero chances. There is an unexpected recovery. There is a person who, after this, completely changed his view on life, death, and the nature of consciousness. Why am I telling this particular story? Because this is a person from the system, from science, who spent his entire life standing on the position, what cannot be touched and measured is nonsense. And it was precisely his life that became an example of what we talk about in these videos. Consciousness is not limited by the body, death is not the finale, but a change of angle. And most importantly, returning from there changes not so much beliefs as daily choices. He could have ignored this experience, written it off as hallucinations of a dying brain, but he honestly admitted, what I experienced there was more real than everything I knew before that. And from that moment, he began to live differently, not as a function of the system, but as a person who understands. Every word, every glance, every choice will remain in that very record that we will later see in the silence between worlds. Thank you for being with me on this channel. I wish you the best possible branch of reality. Subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Take care.